Hello and welcome to Filmmaker's Compass Podcast. I'm Dustin, joined by Christian.
FCP.
And we have a very special guest for today's episode. Very excited.
I'm really happy about this. This is my friend Gregory Veeser. Knows a lot about movies and has some great stories. He is a producer. Really excited to get your perspective on the industry.
Now you are. We'll see at the end. We'll check in at the end. You should write down the number, 1 through 10 now, and then an hour from now, write down 1 through 10. We'll see if the numbers match.
Obviously, first similarity here, right? We're from your neighbors to the east. We're both from Indiana. You grew up in Illinois.
Oh, okay.
As a kid in the Midwest, because we can sort of relate, when did you decide you wanted to get into film?
At the time, I probably didn't realize it, but you just fall in love with movies, and you start trying to figure out how they make movies, and there was a second-run movie theater 2 blocks away, and I think I went to see Batman by myself when I was 10 or 11. And the first time you commit to seeing a movie by yourself, you're either a weirdo or you're a filmmaker or both.
Valid point.
All the John Hughes movies were set in not where I lived, but it looked like where I lived, like the suburbs of Chicago, which was cool, and the Blues Brothers. So then you start associating Hollywood with that, and then they filmed a couple TV movies in my neighborhood, and so it balled up, and you realize you can get paid to do it for a job, and then it goes from there, and then it's hard to do in the Midwest because there's not your uncle in the industry,
right? I kind of know, we would just grab a camcorder and a bunch of our friends, and we used to edit on 2 VCRs,
pause,
going back and forth, and it was like magic to us. But there's no industry there, so it's just your friends and your mom. You need a mom in your story. It's your mom.
One of our we had a group of friends that were kind of all into it. And one of my friends did go to acting school. A few of us ended up doing it for real. But his mom was an actress. She would be in local commercials, and she was in an episode of Unsolved Mysteries. Okay. So she was always the mom because she was a pro.
She was a pro.
Yeah, and we had a local cable channel, straight out of Wayne's World. Nice. Public access, and we did our version of not Wayne's World, but just a talk show, do skits and stuff like that. And so that at least allows you to practice it and do it with real equipment. And I was lucky enough to have that. Now, obviously, my 9-year-old niece has a stop motion app, and she makes movies, and it has ADR, and it has green screen, and it has God. Now it's the tools are a lot easier, so I guess that's a good thing and a bad thing. I wouldn't want to judge it. I'll sound like the old man. But the tools are a lot easier to come by. You don't have to scrap as hard.
Right. That's what we talk about, man. I remember trying to dig up a quality camcorder when you're 11 years old. It's
I like to think it makes you better. Half the players in baseball come from the Dominican Republic, and they tell stories about making a mitt out of the cardboard from a 6-pack. Sure. And meanwhile, you've got spoiled kids in Pasadena who have $300 ceramic bats. Who's going to be a better baseball player, right?
Then you went to NYU.
Went to film school. I don't know how my parents agreed to do that.
That always seems like an awkward conversation.
Yeah, my dad is a physician, and there's no you come out here and people are 3rd and 4th generation film, and no. I guess I was persuasive enough and dedicated enough. My mom visited NYU with me, and I think that convinced her. She sort of fell in love with the place. Yeah. They went to colleges that were urban as well. Okay. So that pinged with them. They gave it a shot, and it was half the cost it is now, so that might have helped. But it was still very expensive, and it was a big deal for them to go. So that was a lot of faith that they had in me, and maybe that's what being a good parent is knowing when and where to have faith, and you sort of want to make sure that was well earned. But it was important to do because at the time you need, like you said, you needed access. There was big cameras. It was the means of production were centralized, and you couldn't make movies with your iPhone like you can now. Right. So you truly, if you accept the hypothesis that film school is important, you needed to go to film school, and you needed to go to one of the big ones, which were mostly New York or LA at that point. Yeah. Now, who knows? This is literally 20 years out of date as far as I can't participate in the debate of should you go to film school or not. But at the time, it was useful to me, and it was great. And I made a lot of the arguments for film school. I made a ton of connections, just friendship-wise. Right. Yeah. People I still either work with today or bump into randomly. A bunch of people have gotten Oscar nominations from my class or the year before or the year after. Wow. Not me. Not yet. Not yet. The networking that comes from that experience still pays off. Teaches you a lot of lessons early. You get to play. Yeah. So there's a lot of non-literal, there's more than just filmmaking as a reason to go to film school. Yeah. It sort of, continues to show up. Even today, you still sort of have NYU conversations with people or whatever school you go to can pay off, as opposed to just coming out here after you got your
Yeah,
English
crash
degree.
on a couch somewhere.
It'll get you a week at someone's house if they're a violet and you're a violet.
You totally just stole my next question out from under me. I don't really think it matters. It sounds like for you, it ended up being a positive experience.
Yes. I mean, I never had a second doubt in my head, right? If you have a doubt or if you don't really know, then you can make the argument that maybe you should get a different degree or a practical degree or like a graduate degree, like a law degree or a business degree. There's also logic that if you have a fallback plan, you will fall back on it.
Right.
There's logic to that too. Like, I think a lot of the people who shrug and quit and give up and become a realtor or run their dad's insurance company at age 27, I think always had that in mind in the back of their head when they were 18, as opposed to 100% I'm dedicated to this. So in that case, film school is worthwhile. And also I needed an advantage. Everyone needs an advantage in this industry.
Yeah.
I started writing down the kind of people. The people in this town, you can categorize, there's like trust fund kids. No offense. God bless if you're a trust fund kid. Lucky you, but I'm not. You have these conversations. I've had people start talking about their trust fund in front of you, or like, and you're the only one who like... You're just like, no judgment, but they're going to laugh. You know, that's what they've got, like, you got to work twice as hard because you need a job and film. You know, you have to simultaneously pen bar and audition.
Right.
Yeah.
And then there's, you know, legacy kids who are just born into it. They like went to Hollywood High. Their dad's an agent and their best friend was this guy. And they've just got this web of connections since they were 5.
Yeah.
Don't even try to compete with that, right? It's not.
Yeah. Because you can't.
And again, God bless. I hope they're successful, and it's not like they're not lesser, but you still have to give yourself some sort of advantage. In my sense, that was sort of a trade school and training and whatever the certification means or does not mean, or whatever the logo means or whatever the connections mean. So like that was I think I would not have been as successful if I just gone to, you know, Champaign-Urbana and gotten a film studies degree.
That's so crazy, dude. My grandma actually used to live...
No offense to the Alina.
No, she used to live in Shelbyville, so we went through Champaign all the time. I know.
That was my backup
that
school.
Exact,
That was my, like...
I know that exact place.
A lot of my friends went there, and it's a great education and all that stuff, but it's not the weapon for the job.
Yeah.
And some people more talented than me have certainly gone to U of I, and for me, you know, I needed all the help I could get.
I have a question. If you went to NYU, is there like a film community out there, or was it just natural to be like, go to LA?
As far as professionally?
Yeah.
I never wanted to live or work in New York City.
Okay. So maybe it was just personal preference.
It's like it's either super poor or super rich. Okay. New York is the great place, and less super poor. I never want to live out there. I think the film community out there is very insular. Like everything in New York, like goes back 200 years.
Yeah, I know it has like a ton of media, but film...
And there's stuff, but it's like Danny Aiello III, you know, to get on his crew, you gotta...
Yeah.
So it's very difficult to break in, and that's also not where it's created, right? Yeah. So the studios were out here. All the shooting used to happen out here, so at least if you're at the point of genesis. Yeah. Whereas in the old days, even if it's shot in New York, it was originated in LA, right? Yeah. Dick Wolf's offices were in LA, not in New York. Yeah. Law and Order. So, but I always wanted, like, LA was always the destination.
It's like the dream. Like, go to LA.
Whether or not that was like accurate, because my vision of LA was from Tony Scott movies and from just all that stuff.
You got out here, you're like, whoa.
I showed up wearing shorts because like it's hot all the time in LA. Like, so my view of LA was completely wrong. I fixed it.
And did you just like pack up a car after you graduated and you're like, I'm going to go to LA? Like, did you know anyone here?
The network of friends I'd made, film school, was very valuable because I actually stayed behind a year or two to like cobble up enough money so that I could, obviously the more money you have when you come out here, the longer of a runway it gives you. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I wanted to have a little bit of that. That gave me another advantage, which was I had a network of friends that was here that could help support me ahead of me, right? Like I had the scouting party. That's helped me get my first apartment and my first roommate. Yeah. My first job, I literally showed up and my buddy's like, I got you a job. Nice. Which just blessed because I didn't have to. I also got a little bit of professional working experience. To save money, I temped at this super high power Park Avenue investment firm who didn't give a crap about my fancy film degree, and I had to really work and I couldn't spell anything wrong and I had to make the copies perfectly, and $1 billion investment firm. So I had a modicum of professional experience just doing stuff most 22 or 23-year-olds don't have. Yeah, so no, that's really smart. Having a little bit of life experience helps. Having friends to help you out and just tell you like, no, we go to Bordner's, we don't go to that bar, and like this is where you go to do this, and there's this place called the Grove, it's awesome, and all that stuff helps you when you're 23, 24, 25, as opposed to exploring the city completely wild-eyed and you know helpless.
Yeah. Sure. So what was the first kind of gig that you got when you came out here?
Well, I was given this job to be a writer's assistant because my friend had left that job.
Okay.
So it was kind of passed to me.
So that job was you're in the industry.
I mean, I could have screwed it up and really easily.
He's like, I didn't.
The guy.
Thank God.
And the guy was writing a Spielberg movie. He's a writer named Sausage Gervasi, who's an amazing writer-director now, and he did a lot of great documentaries and feature films. He did My Dinner with Hervé on HBO most recently. It's not like I was handed the job. Like I had to earn my keep. From day one, just running around and driving all over the place and doing errands and just personal assistant duties. It teaches you about how to behave in the town, and it teaches you where all the agencies are located and where all the production companies are located.
Yeah.
You get to learn all the verbiage, and it was a great job to have. But you had to hopscotch from one job to the next. Cleverest thing I ever did was, if you're looking for stories, the two cleverest things I ever did were...
Oh, we're looking for stories.
Yeah, here we go.
There's a UTA job list. I was able to make a friend who would give me the UTA job list 6 hours early.
Oh, wow.
It comes out on Wednesdays at like 5 o'clock, and he'd send it to me. This unnamed UTA employee would send it to me noon. So I had this like 5-hour head start.
5 hours.
This guy literally did not have a name.
And he would sometimes tell me who it was.
Oh.
And so
that's actually
even more.
incredibly valuable.
And I didn't earn this, but I took advantage of it, and I didn't want to let it slide. So he was like, Michael Bay needs an assistant, and it's going out in 6 hours. And so like I got my resume, and it was faxing stuff back then, and so I faxed it. Weeks and weeks went by, and I faxed them probably too often. And eventually I called the office and they said, well, we're so sorry, but we just haven't brought in anyone for the job yet. And I said, well, listen, how about I just come there and intern for you guys? You can throw me out if you think I'm a crazy person. And I'll just intern until you hire someone, and maybe it's me, maybe it's not, but at least you'll have someone mopping the floors and feeding the dogs and stuff. Wow. And they're like, I guess, I don't know, if you want to trespass, you can trespass. So I did that for several months, and it was a great experience.
Yeah.
And some of the executives there would like slip me like per diem or food or, to get by.
Okay.
But the advice, if I can make that into practical advice for people, which is like, interning is a lot better way in the door than getting a job, because people will cut you a lot more slack if you're doing it for free. Okay. I was allowed to show up and trespass and stalk as long as it didn't cost them any money, right?
Yeah.
But they're not going to pay me if I'm going to be a noob with no experience.
Yeah.
So whenever you get the chance, like always go for the internship. People will listen to you if you're like, I'll do it for free. But to do that, you have to have savings, or you have to have a job, or you have to be a trust fund. That really served me well, and it taught me a lot of good work ethic, and I came across a lot of people who I came across in my later career that I might not have had the chance to. So, you're going to
it all kind of comes back full circle.
It's the world's biggest high school, or smallest high school. And then I kept on working for free, and I worked for free on a friend's independent film. I had nothing to do because I was unemployed, because I was interning. So I'll work in your film. And there was a really pretty girl working on set. I was only working one day, and she's like, oh, are you working tomorrow? Yes, I'm working tomorrow. And she's like, good, we need someone to watch the equipment truck. My job was in downtown LA, very close to where we're recording this. I had to watch the G&E truck, the Grip Electric truck, in an alley in downtown from call time to wrap. That was my job, was to make sure that no one walked off with the lights and cords. Wow. And she just sit there. Again, this was pre-iPhone, so there's nothing to do.
Oh my gosh.
I just like stared at ants
like
for hours. But I wanted to bump into this girl at lunch, and it like, so.
Yeah.
And then her roommate was working on a Tony Scott movie. She noted like, oh my God, Greg is just so dedicated. He didn't leave first. And he's so dedicated. Like, I can really trust him. She set me up with an interview to be one of the assistants for Tony Scott for a movie she was working on. You never know when people are watching you work, right? So like, work hard at everything you can. Okay. Never slack off. You never know when someone is kind of keeping an eye on you. You never know when someone's going to get fired and they need a replacement. And the last person they saw was you doing your job well, and they just grab you and replace you. And if I hadn't been just sitting in a chair watching, ants, then I never would have gotten a chance to work, on a Scott movie, and then blah, 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 and that had ramifications. So like, those were two early lessons that I learned that I've tried to keep up with as I've gotten older and lazier and more of a contradiction and hypocrite.
Oh, man. Wow. No, I mean, that's good advice. You have had the experience since that time, obviously, working on a number of productions, and I know one of them is, in fact, Man on Fire.
Did I work on Man on Fire? It seems like I have at this point, because I've told the story so often that like I have to catch myself. So I, after working for Tony Scott, I was an assistant for a couple more, really cool, helpful directors and writers, and I ended up being an assistant for a producer named Lucas Foster, who ran Simpson Bruckheimer for years, and then went off on his own, was an independent producer, and I was his assistant, and then became development executive and sort of an associate producer at his company in feature films. And so he'd made Man on Fire a couple years before I got to working with him. I worked my way up the ladder from assistant to executive to producer. Both he and I would get confused about the films that I'd worked on and hadn't worked on. And that's forgivable because a lot of the same crew, like in most tracts, would be loyal, and if not the casting director, and then a DP, or then some actors or whatever, and you'd know the same people. And so it would be like, well, what was that place that we were at in Mexico? And I would know the answer even though I wasn't there. And then and so it becomes foggy when you start just like mushing together all these credits.
Yeah. No, you were there. I remember you.
And you start misremembering your own credits.
That sounds like a good problem to have.
Well, you got to make sure your machine. You have to honestly misremember your credits.
Yeah.
Because thanks to IMDb,
yeah,
you can't get away budging, which you used to, which some people still do. But like, it's really easy to check up on someone. If not IMDb, just knowing a guy who knew a guy who worked on the show, and you can check up on that.
Yeah.
But you can't be as nakedly dishonest, which is a bummer because that's what Hollywood is built upon. Whether I like it or not, you got to try to be honest about what you worked on because it'll circle back, and it's helpful to just to stay sharp like that. But it's sad because the old days, my camera professor at NYU was like older than dirt. He was talking about squibs.
Okay.
And how you shoot them, like, I don't know if it was frame rate or exposure. And he's like, I tell you, this one time we were squibbing up, Bobby Duvall for Godfather. And wait, was that Bonnie and Clyde? Huh, hold on. And he just like paused.
Like some old guy.
The guy couldn't remember the difference between a Bonnie and Clyde story and a Godfather story. And like, oh my God. Like, I hope, the phrase, he's forgotten more about filmmaking than you'll ever know. Like, that he literally forgot more about filmmaking than I ever will know. So that's the good old days now with, everything is, memorialized forever. So I did not work on Man on Fire, but I can act like I did.
Okay. All right. Well, that's good to know.
Could impress someone at a party, but not on a podcast.
Give this man an acting credit.
Okay. Well, you did do Law Abiding Citizen.
I did do Law Abiding Citizen.
What was that like? Do you have any sweet stories about?
It was
just doing a movie that everybody's seen.
Anytime you have the luck to work on a movie, it's a miracle. So anytime you get an experience to work on a movie, it's great. The fact that it was a fun movie with a lot of great people involved is even better.
Yeah.
Turned out pretty good.
Turned out pretty good.
It had been developed for years, for at least 7 or 8 years before I even worked for the company.
Wow.
We worked on it for 2 years and then it started getting made. So it's a long, long, long incubation process and many drafts. And I was lucky enough to be involved with like a lot of the different writers and iterations of it. It taught me a lot. The lesson I learned was you never, ever, 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 ever shoot a movie in chronological order because it enables you to have horrible habits. And it was a total coincidence, just from scheduling, and we changed directors, and just everything got shaken up. The weather and actors' availability, all that added up to the schedule was in narrative order. The first day of shooting was the first scene in the movie, more or less, and the last day of shooting was the last scene in the movie.
Whoa.
And
you never hear that.
The problem was it enabled us to continually rewrite as we went along. The schedule was very strict because the company had to release the film for financial reasons. It had been pushed a couple months anyway. And so we needed to go. And the script wasn't quite perfect, and we were being perfectionists about it. I'm sure all the producers above me and the director above me were all perfectionists, and lesser directors and producers probably would have settled for a film that wasn't up to their standards, but we weren't about to do that. Yeah. We worked on the script almost every night after we finished shooting. Wow. The film's better. The film's viewable and releasable because of it. But we were coming up with new endings.
Oh man!
And that's sort of when I went transitioned from assistant to a producer or executive because I was in. And at a certain point, I think people were just too tired to come up with suggestions. And so I would raise my hand and come up with a suggestion. And I bled in the room with everybody. So eventually, I was part of the team. But literally, there was I don't want to talk out of school too much. These are all fun stories. And no one, hates each other. But there was a printer on set at Video Village for the last week of the shoot. And it was warm pages to the actors.
Oh, my gosh.
Which they were amazing because to deal with that is crazy. You should have your lines weeks or months in advance, if not days, but certainly not minutes in advance. But at that point, everyone was in a joke, and we were just trying to make it to the finish line.
Everyone's like, this is our reality.
Creativity on set is never the greatest thing. You should allow for it, but you shouldn't plan for it.
Yeah.
I think that
seems smart.
I like the plan the dive the plan method of filmmaking because at least you got a plan. It's never going to hold up to the elements. But at least you tried. At least you went through the effort to make a plan. At least you've got something to cling. You've got some rubble to cling to as the boat sinks. If you don't have a plan, then you're just asking for it. That was a very good example of that happening. But it paid off. Like I said, the movie I think is pretty cool. It's kind of the genre I like and I like to work in, and I've been lucky enough. Like I've never had to work on horrible movies that were outside of my interest level. This is an elevated genre movie. It's a revenge pick, which everyone loves. Cars blow up, people get their heads blown off, and it's fun. But it has enough substance to it that you can actually talk about, you know, like morality and the legal system and defending your family and fun stuff like that. So those are the kind of movies I try to gravitate towards, and that was a super fun one to get to do. Have fun with all the talent and the crew and the locals and the LA people that you drove out there, and the entire circuit.
Yeah, funny story about that movie. I actually saw it because my mom saw it and called me and was like, "You need to go check out this movie." So I was like, "Okay."
Your mom saw? Was she like they sent her to the wrong?
No, like she went with one of her friends.
That's great. That's awesome.
Yeah, she was like, "Oh, you'd love this movie. You got to go see it." I'm like, "Okay." So I went.
Word of mouth.
That's how it happened.
That's what it's supposed to be, right?
It came out too early. The movie was supposed to come out several months later in February of 2010, but there was some financial reasons it needed to come out sooner. And so it only got one trailer instead of two. There's a science to marketing that I don't know anything about. Awareness is tracked and unaided awareness and blah, blah, blah. And you just, there's a ramping period and you can't rush it, right? You need, that's why you're getting trailers for movies that are coming out next summer or the winter. And if you just jam stuff down people's throats in a 3 or 4 month period, it can't saturate. And so the movie didn't open as well as we thought it should have, but it had good word of mouth. It had better legs than similar genre movies.
The drop off wasn't.
No, I mean,
wasn't as bad.
Given the stars in it at that time.
It's weird though. If you've ever, I mean, we've all probably seen like a movie came out and you're like, "Oh shoot, I didn't see anything for that," you know, and who knows what happened, but you're like, "I didn't even know that was coming out."
The most tragic one, and I almost brought it up as we talk about later, is Warrior, the Gavin O'Connor movie. With you giving me a blank face, like disapproving my point, with Tom Hardy.
Oh no, I thought you were talking about the Warriors.
No, Warrior.
Okay,
the MMA movie, amazing movie, super talented people. I've never really worked with or know any of them, so I'm just speaking as a fan.
Yeah,
I love that movie. I watch it repeatedly. You can show it to anyone. You can show it to your mom. You can show it like anyone who's old enough to watch. A movie, like it spans demographics and age and race and sex. It was a complete disaster financially on its initial release. It came out the weekend of. If I have this, I only know this because I looked it up. It came out the weekend of the 10th anniversary of September 11th. So it was like a weird somber holiday weekend that wasn't sort of, it was like literally the opposite.
Yeah, they're having like ceremonies.
And it was opening football. I think it was like the opening weekend of the NFL. And so all the guys, like there was a third thing that took away from like the main demo that you advertise it to. Yeah. And the advertising didn't know how to place it. And when you watch the trailer is less than the movie is. Yeah. And you watch the movie, and the movie is like a modern day Rocky. And it's just like, and nobody saw anything about it.
Well, now I want to see it.
Warriors are almost like a must watch. Wow. Second behind the must watch we'll talk about later.
No, that's great. Obviously, in your experience now as a producer, you already gave some good advice. Like, don't shoot chronologically. Don't be flexible.
It's like,
but up to
all right, got it, Greg, next.
What thoughts? I mean, what advice would you have to someone who wants, like me? I want to be a producer. What advice do you have about how to be the best? What can you be doing as a 14-year-old in Kansas to prepare for that now?
I wish I read more. I mean, the more experience you can have as a human being, the better off you are. Whether it's reading or whether it's having jobs that just teach you about life and people. I don't know. It varies. The last thing actors should do when you're kids is take acting classes. You should learn to sing, and you should practice archery, and you should do everything in the world that makes you a person, not trained to imitate people.
Okay. Yeah.
Do that when you're doing it professionally, but instead become a real person. Those always end up. And the same with writers, too. Like, the craziest writers are the ones who are like, after I got out of the Army, I worked on a crab boat in Alaska for 2 years, and then, they've got a lot of stuff to say. Right? Yeah. As opposed to just like, I've been training to be a writer since I was 14.
Yeah.
So
makes sense.
I feel I'm only giving advice on the things I'm bad at. So I think you should hustle as much as possible and do it again. Write another script. Don't just write one and stare at it all day because it's perfect and beautifully done. Those are the people who succeed. Like, regardless of talent, like if a guy writes 20 scripts, and I've met these guys who they've got 20 scripts that are all horrible, but like they've got an agent and they've got a nice house and they've got it's just the hustle really does it, and you've got to exercise that muscle. Yeah. If you don't have it come naturally to you, there's a lot to be said for just being ready for luck. I think there's a lot of luck to it. I think that talented people don't make it, and untalented people do. And I think some of that's fate, and you've just got to accept it, that it's this industry is a casino, as one of my friends says. You have to be ready for luck, right? Like just like in blackjack, if it's going tens rich, you better be ready to bet, and you better have been paying attention. And if you get an opportunity to be in an elevator with Christopher Nolan, you better have a finished script, and you better have your pitch down, and you better have social skills that you can, not be a jerk. Like, you have to be prepared for the luck, right? Yeah. If you're not, then you only get one of those once in a lifetime, and it's gone. And I think those are the people who make it, are the people who are prepared for luck. Yeah. It's like the opposite of preparing for a disaster. Yeah. Like, you need your go bag full of positive, good stuff. Yeah. And just like with an earthquake, you can't make it on the day. Like, if it's not ready, if you're not prepped for luck, then you're out of luck.
No, that's honestly amazing advice. Actually, it's almost something that I think people take for granted.
I do have have you ever actually done an elevator pitch? Like, have you ever not necessarily
like in an elevator?
Not literally in an elevator, but have you ever had that real short window? You're next to somebody.
There's walking to the
walking
to the car. You got until they get to their car
exactly,
and they start walking faster.
They're the
good news is you can tell how interested they are by how they vary the speed of their walking. Like, if they pause and they find a little shade to listen to you, great. And if they hurry up and get their keys out and start hitting the alarm,
okay, cool.
Then you're not doing a very good job of pitching. So that can actually be much more. At least in an elevator, they're trapped and they can't get out.
Yeah, I wonder if Christopher Nolan avoids elevators. He's never. I don't want to go in those. That's pretty cool though. We often probably think of Spielberg or somebody if you had that chance, but it's not always just the biggest name in Hollywood. I mean, you could be next to somebody, like you said, 1 minute walk and could change the game.
No, that's really good advice.
Hey man, literally all of this advice is worth as much as it cost you.
Wow. Thank you for just diminishing the first half of this podcast. I appreciate it, man.
Okay. Trick is to manage expectations. That's what.
So, other thing I want to, just because you have seen a lot of stuff and experienced it, and I guess if there were 3 rules you could give to anyone who's planning to come here, make the next, $1 billion franchise, what advice do you have? And if it's not 3, that's fine. Maybe more or less. Don't worry about it.
I wish I knew that. You better want to do it for real. Otherwise, you'll just quit and go home. I think that the people who come here to be rich or famous, I think there's easier ways to be rich, and there's easier ways to be famous, or be around famous people, learning that stuff. You actually have to creatively want to make films, and you kind of can't have any other close second place things. And I would make sure of that. And if you need to go, backpack through Italy for 6 months, then do it before you commit to going here, because it's a big sacrifice. You sacrifice a lot financially and with family and relationships. Yeah. So there's a big cost to pay to try to do this the right way. So you need to make sure, do yourself that favor. 2, you should learn where all the best free parking is as far as
malls. Oh my God, that's very that's the best advice.
Well, in the Midwest, they don't have paid parking. No. You could do a meme of things that you don't get when you're free parking. What do you mean free parking? Everything's free in LaGrange. In LA, you have to pay. I was at ICM and they gave me 6 free all-day passes because the receptionist screwed up. So I've gold. Yeah. I've got 5 more left of just free parking in Century City, and I just can't wait to come over and just go shopping. I would always communication is super important. You should really be loyal to your friends. Always network with people that you meet and keep it up even when there's no reason to. Ping them on their birthday. Ping them when you read about them if they've got something coming out. You never know when it's going to pay off. You never know when they can help you. Yeah. Do favors when people do the same thing to you. When they chase you down and do a favor for them because you'll be able to return it someday. Right. Theoretically, I used to drive people to the airport whenever they asked because I'm well, now you owe me a trip to LAX, and I kind of had a favor bank built up in my head of LAX trips, and then they invented Uber, and that just all went down the drain because nobody asks you for rides to the airport anymore.
I need your friends, man. Mine still bug me.
They do. Yeah. There's a real value to loyalty, and you never know, but you work with someone year after 8 years go by, and suddenly you find a reason to work with them, or they find a reason where they need to ring you up. So it's underrated to just be loyal.
Right. I think about just myself. If I was if I'm working on a project, who am I going to call? I'm going to start with the people that I know. I guess that makes a lot of sense. You keep those relationships up, and you're a good friend, and that's where I'm going to go.
Well, and your last note is pretty much just be a good person, because those type of skills are going to
Everybody who
the
knows me is
ability to
rolling
network,
their eyes right now.
the ability to
Yeah?
to cultivate
I wanna be no
relationships, right? That's what makes you successful in life, whether you're making movies or you're running for politics or I think too often we forget that relationships are the currency of the world. If you know the right people and you've driven them to the airport enough times, then
Also,
sometimes it works out.
Life's too short, and you should surround yourself with people you like, people you respect, and likewise too. Because in between making hit movies that make $1 billion, there is some downtime. You've got to go to lunch with people, and you got to hear about their families and go to their family parties. And it would be nice if you surrounded yourself with cool people that were good to you and you were good to them. You might just end up as a happier person, right? And I think that's what sustains you. Just like it keeps you sane, right?
Yeah.
Like when if you've not been just this heat-seeking missile that surrounds yourself with jerks who are always slitting each other's throats, if you've actually surrounded yourself with cool people that you actually don't have a problem being around, like that makes a big difference. Yeah. And I think that you need that. Okay. Otherwise you'll go crazy. Or you'll just quit and leave. And that would be a shame if you quit and leave because, you couldn't take it, not because you chose something else or you voluntarily decided, well, I've had my fun. Now I'm going to go back to Ohio. To do it because you just were unhappy because of the unhappy people around you and stuff. Like that's what you kind of you have to manage yourself as best you can.
Okay. No.
Or just listen to a lot of podcasts and tune out the world. Just turn on the noise reduction. And
good advice. Yeah. Great advice.
Well, I know we wanted to talk movies.
Yeah, so we should talk cars or nutrition or the keto diet.
Well, talking movies is like my favorite.
I asked you before you came on, what do you think is an incredibly underrated film? And I really liked your answer.
There's a small tour director who's making a name for himself, and he's coming up, trying to get some name recognition, trying to find actors to work with, and I figured I could help him out. So I chose a movie directed by Michael Mann, who you don't normally associate underrated with, and I've never worked directly for Michael Mann. So we'll switch into fan. If we come across anyone that I've worked with or worked around, I'm happy to, as of now, this is fan mode.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's also better because you don't want to meet your heroes. His films can be underrated in the sense Manhunter is one of the most underrated of the Hannibal Lecter saga. Thief is an unbelievably underrated heist crime, because it's sort of not a prototype for Heat, but it's an earlier version of that's less famous. But I think The Insider is both underrated, and it's a good lesson for people to watch if you're a filmmaker, if you're an actor, if you're a writer, if you're a director or producer. So it fell into both categories. And I'd recently watched it, so I didn't have to rewatch it.
I think that's fantastic. I mean, I agree with you, and it blows my mind. I feel like everything I watch by Mann, I'm just like, how is this movie not a bigger deal? Because I think he's a brilliant filmmaker.
Well, I think that you can make the argument that there are some films that don't deserve to be...
You're going to say Miami Vice?
I'm going to say everything that came out after The Insider.
What about Collateral? I love Collateral. Okay.
I'm sorry. I forgot about Collateral. It's the movies that you saw earlier are always more. This movie came out when I was in film school, and I loved Heat, and so this was kind of for me personally. But I think that it's also like it was released by Disney, who's not super good at marketing and selling R-rated drama.
Yeah,
it's got a very vague title. It has a movie star in a very unmarketable persona, which is a fat dude with graying hair and a weird accent.
Yeah,
it's about smoking litigation. It's just all these. It's got all these strikes going against it superficially, but it's an absolutely amazing movie. Yeah, and I like it on many, many levels, and we can talk about them now. But it's essentially an action movie with no gunshot. I mean, it reads and it feels, and there's scenes that are
absolutely
shot and edited like a thriller, like a serial killer movie. Yeah. I mean, you could do 2 or 3 reshot scenes, and suddenly it's a serial killer movie. And that's a cool thing to do with an audience. And there's a lot of other Mann tropes that are used throughout it too. But for some reason in this one, because there's no shootouts or explosions, his technique sort of stands out more. Because,
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, spoilers. I'm thinking about the scene at his house where he thinks there's an intruder. Mm-hmm. That is like the when I think of scenes where I feel like you feel a character's paranoia and you feel this foreboding, like it's definitely in one of the best scenes I've ever. It's insane. Yeah. And as you said, there's no traditional action but there's parts where you're just captivated and sitting on the edge of your
it's
seat.
what you can see and what you can't see. I mean, it's very advanced what he's doing. It's hard to break down. You know, he shows the furnace light up.
Yes.
For a jump scare.
Yeah.
And the daughter gets jump scared. There's a lot of character in it because he's got his daughter. Like, the daughters won't go to sleep.
Yeah.
And so they're coming with him. And you're like, oh, no, they're going to shoot the daughter. So there's that tension. But there's a lot of great beats when he's, despite everything else, being a good dad.
Yeah.
You know? Like, he's, sit down, honey, read a book. And he's trying to calm her so she doesn't freak out, but also doesn't walk in the way of a bullet.
Yeah.
And he gets a gun, and he wants to protect her from it, so he says, stay there. And the whole time, as an audience, you're tracking the girl, because you're thinking the cliched version is the girl's going to get shot or something.
Yeah. Right.
But he's just setting you up for all these scares, and I wonder if the furnace light is sort of a joke. Like, ha, ha, ha.
Yeah.
And then Russell Crowe goes out in the backyard, and he's looking for evidence, and then there's the raccoon that he almost shoots, and so it deflates your tension.
Yeah.
Like, oh, it's just a raccoon. But then he looks down and he sees the broken popsicle sticks that were holding up the plants, and he sees a footprint.
The footprint.
Yeah. And you don't even know. Maybe it was like kids. Maybe it was. It's nothing as overt as but it scares you because it reverses back on you, and then the daughter comes out, and again, it's a character-based scare. If we talk long enough, I'll get into character versus plot. But you're not interested in the scene because, he might shoot his daughter, which would be the bad.
Right.
What it is he wants to protect his daughter's innocence by not letting her see the gun and not letting her think that there's intruders.
Yeah.
And he's trying to do his duty as a father while dealing with the consequences of being an insider. Yeah. And that balance is the character balance, and that's why it's so much more thrilling than just a plot-based intruder of the backyards. And there's many throughout the entire. There's a scene when he goes to the courthouse, and there's men with machine guns, and there's like sirens, and the music, and you would think it's like Jack Ryan going through the streets of Bogota, going to catch a RPG, but it's not. It's he's, in America, and he's safe, but the scenes are ratcheted up with all this tension. It makes the movie seem much more elevated than it is. Which is one of the fun.
It's insane. Or the one where he drives by his house and he sees the.
There's a car on fire, a random car on fire.
Yes.
And you can or cannot associate that with something going on. There's all these scenes where the paranoia. They do a good job of building, and they build it from the beginning of the movie. They show the movie's masterclass. So we can't go through it scene by scene. But like the first shot of the movie is scientists celebrating with Kate, and there's a giant glass wall, and Jeffrey Wigand is boxing up his stuff because he's been fired. And he's looking at them with either resentment or pain or frustration. Yeah. He's been fired, and as he walks out the door, like even the guard is giving him the look, like some hourly dude, and Wigand's looking at him. Yeah. And later on, when Jeffrey Wigand has to return to sign the amended confidentiality agreement, everyone's looking at him, and he says, "I don't like being back here," and people are giving him side eye. Mm-hmm. And in the room where he confronts Michael Gambon. Thomas Sandifer. When he confronts, there's characters who you don't even see. They're just lurking in the background. And they're out of focus. Yeah. And he does shots, instead of over the shoulder, it's over the tapping hand. And so these people who are meant there to intimidate him, or maybe say one sentence, it's just this constant haunting feeling. And then as he's leaving, you're right over his shoulder, so you're paranoid with him. And then the car, he's furious. I forget when chronologically. He's furious at one point, and so he goes to blow off some steam by going golfing, drive to the driving range. Yes. And not only is he's alone, and it's a scary scene because there's just pools of light and it's shutting down. Yeah. And it's shot dreamily. Like there's a weird out of focus slow motion shot. And then this dude pulls up in a car, and he's scary looking. He looks like a bird or something, and he's in a suit.
and he's just looking at him.
And he's bigger than Russell Crowe. Yeah. And he's better at golf than Russell Crowe. Yeah. And his car and his suit is nicer than Russell Crowe's. Like he's just a scary guy. And every time Russell Crowe pauses, he pauses and he waits for Russell Crowe to shoot, and he's clearly intimidating him. And then Russell Crowe tries to find him. So at this point, all this paranoia has been justified. So later in the movie, when stuff like a burning car or stuff like a flame in a furnace pops up, we've been conditioned to be just as paranoid as he has. Yeah. So we jump at the same things he jumps at. So we're always in his point of view, and we don't think he's being foolish for being paranoid. Yeah. We're as paranoid as he is. Yeah. And that's like one of the clever storytelling tricks that Mann uses.
I hope if you haven't seen it, you need to see it.
It's worth watching, and you got to watch it like 5 times. I mean, it's... Yeah. The plot is so layered and so complicated. It's really 2 movies in one. First half of the movie is sort of the Russell Crowe story. Yes. And the second half of the movie is the Al Pacino story. Mm-hmm. And that's jarring
Yeah.
They became supporting characters in each other's movies. The plot is extremely layered, and there's many people's jobs that you have to figure out who they are and what at CBS, and if they're reporters, if they're lawyers, if they're journalists, and the tobacco executives and lawyers, and why is he testifying in Mississippi, and who are these people? And it's full of phone conversations, so it's extremely confusing from a plot point of view, and you got to straighten that out before you can drink in all the performances. Really, and you're not confused anymore by things, and so it's fifth and sixth viewing is sort of when it becomes so detailed. But it's worth it because you sort of, that's when you get to the character stuff. It's not a story about cigarette litigation. It's not a story about the media and news and corporate
journalistic integrity.
It's like these men are doing what they think are the right thing, and what's the cost of that?
And I think that,
and that's what's relatable because I don't. And so the bon mot that I heard that I'm going to repeat and take credit for as often as I can, not on a podcast. On a podcast, I can't get away with it, but in person I can. Is your goal as a filmmaker and a storyteller is to tell a story about a relatable human experience, but through a character that you've never met.
I like that. I like that.
That's how you can tell science fiction stories or old Western stories, because it's a relatable human experience. I just want a cool, interesting person to be telling me the story. Yeah. And I've never personally met like a famous insider who has to testify. And I've never met, award-winning journalists with dozens of Emmys and stuff like that. Those are crazy people. Most regular people don't get to meet them. But the story they're telling is something's wrong. I'm going to stick my neck out and fix it. And guess what? I got my head chopped off over it. It isn't a happy ending.
No.
You lose your wife, or you have to quit your job, or you lose your reputation, or you lose your house. There's serious consequences, and you need to examine if it's worth it, and the price of being honest, and how you find happiness. He's happier teaching school for $51,000 a year than he is making $500,000.
Yeah.
But the cave he has to crawl through to get there is extremely harrowing, and some people might not make it. Some people might turn around. So that's a really relatable story to anybody, but it's told through these really interesting and exotic people. That's why it's a great story and an example to watch.
Yeah, I think a lot of times in cinema, right, the notion of truth, and I don't think this is cinema, right? This is literature as far back as we've had it. It's always been, there's truth, and there's people who embrace truth and people who don't, right? And that's kind of our protagonist and our antagonist. And I think that he does such a good job of saying, okay, do you know the costs of pursuing the truth, and are you willing to do it? Because there are times where where I'm watching a movie and I'm like, dang, I don't know if I want to. Is it really worth it, man?
That Mercedes was really nice, and now he's
I think the first time I saw it, I was just blown away by it. I was like, wow, that is a movie about real life.
And the reason it falls into the underrated category is because Heat is an extremely similar movie where it's two men who are extremely good at their jobs, and that's a man trope. Right?
Yeah,
everybody in every man film is the most qualified person ever, and it's cool. It's what makes it fun. And they have to choose how dedicated are they going to be to the job, or are they going to let go? Yeah. And there's a price you pay. It's the whole don't have anything in your life that you can't walk away from in 60 seconds flat when you feel the heat come around the corner. That's kind of the inverse of And so, Al Pacino does commit, and De Niro doesn't. De Niro gets a girlfriend, and De Niro, and so De Niro pays a price. And Val Kilmer pays a price. Val Kilmer walks away from his wife, and he survives, but at what cost?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so
that's always
the
crazy
insider
when
does
she drives by like that.
Just one little pass, and he's gone. And so that's the cost, right? Insider does the same thing. What is the cost these men pay for having this level of dignity and honesty?
Yeah.
But it does it without gunfights in downtown LA, without awesome action set pieces, without car chases.
Yeah.
It dramatizes the same ideas and feelings and emotions, but without the flash and the lights and the explosions, and it's just as entertaining.
Yeah.
By my lights, at least. So that's what goes into the underrated category. Is it? Okay. He strips away the flash, and he just gets to the emotion, and it's just as entertaining. I think The Insider is as entertaining as Heat is.
No,
even though it's
agree 100%.
Not visceral. That's kind of what always shocks me, is that it's this action movie that without bullets.
Yeah. Well, just the one bullet.
Yeah, the one.
Yeah. No. It is. I'm glad you picked it because I think it is totally. I mean, it's a movie I don't even think about that all much.
It's a good example. The other note I wrote that I should bring up is for filmmakers out there, and this at every level, because I catch myself falling into this trap. Your characters, your main character, your hero, need to be compelling, and that word gets thrown around a lot in meetings without people thinking about what it means. But compelling, not likable. So a lot of times when people are discussing, they're like, "Oh, he's not a likable." Doesn't have to be likable. That's a mistake. It has to be compelling. That'll make a good hero. I'm not saying anything genius, right? Like every lead in a TV series going back since NYPD Blue has been more compelling than likable.
Yeah.
It's the anti-hero.
The anti-hero.
Tony Soprano is really likable, and he's the number one. Walter White, all the way down, compelling. Same here with Jeffrey Wigand. He's got a temper. He's a bad dad. He's a horrible husband.
He's a drunk.
And he's not he's not really a good dad. And he tries, but he's a flawed dad and a horrible husband. And he has a huge temper. Half the problems in his life are his fault. The other half are big tobaccos.
Yeah.
And he's not a guy you want to be. He's not a person that you. But he's compelling. He's really interesting because he does have a code. He'll slip into when he relates to science and when he tells these stories, his humanity comes out when he talks about the aspirin recall.
Yeah.
Or when he talks about when he's doing his first day of chemistry class as a teacher.
Yeah.
Or when he's talking to his daughters about your lungs and asthma.
Yeah.
Like then like you see these layers to this guy and he's complex and compelling. But he's not likable. And you should always remember that. Same thing to a lesser degree with Al Pacino. He's a little more likable, but he's kind of a loudmouth jerk. You'd really not want him as boss. You see the way he treats Debbie Mazar, where she's a high level executive, but he treats her like an assistant. So he's also not super likable, but he's very, very, very compelling. So keep that in mind as you create a character. Don't try to make him likable. Just make him interesting and someone you want to watch. And that's going to help you.
That's awesome.
That's great advice.
Yeah.
Now, why do you think those are so compelling characters? Do you think is it the way that Mann constructs it? Because we know both of them, essentially the lines in their lives that they're not going to cross, right? They know regarding the worlds they live in, where the right and wrong is, and he takes them both up to that. Is that part of it? I mean, what do you...
You have to be able to...
Give me the 30-second answer on the 6-month seminar class.
I relate to those guys when similar things happen. When Al Pacino is sandbagged by Mike Wallace in the meeting. Yeah. When he's railing at the head of TV, not Cluster. When he's railing at Filmmaker Hall. Yeah. About, why is he going to do this, that, and he's giving one of his speeches. Yeah. And he's like, and Mike Wallace is just interrupting him slowly. Like, Lowell. He's like, I'm with him on this one. And you realize that he's just been totally sandbagged by his partner, and he's on his own. Like you've had those moments where your friend or your partner, your family member that you thought was with you, has been deceiving you, and everyone has those moments. Right. So I can relate to those, even though it never happened on the 40th floor, in Manhattan. Yeah. And the same thing with all the stuff, arguments that Russell Crowe gets into in the family. Like I've had all these, so you make them relatable to the people. That's what makes it interesting and sort of again, compelling. Not I don't like it when he's in the situation, but it's watchable.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a really good point too with, as far as giving these characters something that they commit to, right? Whatever their mission that they're on, I'm going to do this. And really we're watching to see if they're truly committed to seeing it all the way through, right? I think if you make that thing incredibly challenging and like you said, interesting, not just like, I'm gonna walk out this door. You're like, well, I could do that. But if I'm like, I'm gonna jump from here to that window, you'd be like, all right, well, I'm gonna watch, right? And I think you gotta give people something that it's like you would have to be really committed to want to do that.
There's a cool filmmaking trick that I learned. It's second generation Simpson Bruckheimer when I worked at Warp for Lucas Foster. And the terminology, maybe I'm not supposed to share it, maybe it's top secret, but just because you know it, it's still hard to do, which is you want to vapor lock with the characters. And by vapor lock, it means they're stuck and they can't walk away, like you said, right? They've got to see it through. If you do that, if your characters are stuck and they've got to go through the tunnel instead of quitting and walking home, then you've got a compelling movie. I'll use the example of Die Hard. There's the best movie of all time. Yep. It's certainly not underrated. So it's not
I know this will make more sense, but that's like my mom's favorite movie.
Your mom sounds like she needs to have a fan club.
She loves Die Hard.
So the Vapor Lock in Die Hard, there's a character-based one and a plot-based one. And like all things, it's better if it's character-based.
Yeah.
You rely on it. But plot-based sort of is the paint, and then character-based is the actual support beams. So the plot-based Vapor Lock, why doesn't Bruce Willis just go home?
Yeah.
Like, just go home. It's dangerous. You look at you. Dude, you cut your feet. Your clothes are dirty.
Yeah.
Like, just go home.
Yeah.
Well, you can't because terrorists have locked the door and they'll shoot you if you go home.
Right.
It's a plot-based, right? So I guess I'll stick around. Character-based Vapor Lock is so much more compelling, which is he's got to fix his marriage.
Yeah.
That his marriage was on the rocks and he made it worse when he showed up. And before he had a chance to fix it, terrorists came in and took his wife. He's fixing his marriage by murdering terrorists. Right?
Yeah.
So that's why Bruce Willis can't go home. It's a character. So that Vapor Lock is awesome in that movie. It's ironclad. In The Insider, both Russell Crowe and Al Pacino's reputations are going to be ruined beyond belief unless they take it through to the end, right?
Yeah.
They're going to get sued. They're going to be fired. All these bad things are happening to them, and they can't just throw their hands up and say I quit, because then the bad guys will win. It'll go down in history that Russell Crowe is a liar and Al Pacino's a bad journalist.
Yep.
So they have to make it through the end. They have to survive long enough for Al Pacino to get the corrected version on the air. He's vindicated. Russell Crowe's vindicated.
Yeah.
They're both, their careers are in tatters, but the character-based Vapor Lock is what got them through all of that. And that's why you can't turn it off, because you want to, like,
that's incredible.
You've got to be with them.
Yeah.
Like that's a difficult thing to do. It's easy to do for a plot base, right? Plot is you just have the terrorists lock the doors, or
exactly, yeah.
But character based is the real good stuff, and that's why movies like this sort of last for decades.
That was awesome.
I think that was a great explanation
Yeah.
too.
Steal only from the best.
No, you. Hey,
that was great.
That's what you got to do. I also think it's cool that the movie is based on actual events. Obviously, this is not anything that I was really aware of was going on in the world, right? When I was a kid, I never watched 60 Minutes or anything. Watching the movie now, almost 20 years later, we see the impact of their actions and how it has changed the world, and we can only assume so many people's lives for the better. And I think that when you go back and watch the film, I think that's something, I don't think Mann intended that when he in 99 when he made it, but I think it is something that adds a little more power to the film. You see the mountain that they moved, and you almost take it for granted now, the forces that they were up against. I think that's a cool thing too.
Yeah.
Good choice. Listen, you have any shout outs, like your mom or anyone you gotta plug before?
Do you think that my family, who listens to me rant about movies all day long, is gonna voluntarily do it in stereo?
Well, I will tell you this.
Like they do, they all the time. I love them. I love my family, but they'll like, oh, I just saw this horrible movie, or your mom and I watched this horrible show. I'm like, I could have told you it was horrible. I knew it was horrible from the second I saw it. I read it. They never say it out loud, but it's like, yeah, we didn't that would be worse than the movie. Your self-righteous, self-aggrandizing rant about how your opinions are superior than the dozens of filmmakers who sweat and blood to make that movie would be worse than the actual movie itself. So I'm slowly catching on to that fact. So my family, if they're watching it or listening as an accident, don't have any. I'm pitching a bunch of stuff. This month and next month are all about pitching, which is a totally different discipline, and I know far less about that because it's much harder. But if and when they sell, and if and when I've got people's to a time and a place to tune in or to go buy a ticket, then I will happily come in.
We will gladly
name
share.
drop.
Yeah, we'd love you to come back on.
But up until then, it's just sweating and hard work and hustling around like everyone else does, and hopefully watching some good movies in between or listening to some good podcasts in between.
Nice.
But other than that, I'm just hustling around.
Fantastic.
All right.
Last thing, if anyone wanted to find you, any advice?
I'm pretty stalkable. I'm on LinkedIn and I'm on Facebook, and you could probably
find the man on
follow
LinkedIn.
Me.
Yeah, that's what's that.
Awesome. LinkedIn's where it's at.
And I'm happy and happy to come on and give advice, and you always need to meet people and hang out, and so I'm glad that you guys have this because it's great to talk and
thank you.
Thank you.
And it was a pleasure having you on the show.
I hope you'll come back. Maybe you should come on. We should talk Die Hard. That would be fun.
that's just, I mean, you're asking for trouble. Like, the real challenge would be like, let's talk Die Hard 3. And, like, that would be tying one hand behind our backs.
Yeah, that's true.
Actually, that's unfair. The latter Die Hards would be the... Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much
thank
for
you.
coming on. I really appreciate it. And for all the listeners out there, definitely send us your thoughts. If you got any questions, we will be happy to relay them and respond.
All right, well, you can follow me at Big Kid D-Man.
You can find me at IndyCal5.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in.